Hello, how you doing? It's Phil Thatch, and I'm very excited today because I'm going to be going out shooting for the first time with my Viltrox full frame autofocus 16mm f1.8 prime lens for Nikon Z series cameras, f1.8 on an ultra wide. That is really cool. Now today I'm going to go out doing some shooting that I might do with an f4 prime lens. I'm just going to do some landscape photography and see how it does with that. I'll do some photography that requires f1.8 or close to it on another occasion. Let's take a look at the lens. Here it is. There is, on the back of this lens, a rubber weather sealing gasket. Now they call it dust proof, but I took it out in the rain today and it did fine. There's also a USB-C port for firmware upgrades. This lens has an aperture ring that you can have clicked, or you can turn it off and have it declicked. Me, I couldn't care less if it even had that thing. I keep it in A all the time and control the aperture with a command dial on my camera, like a modern camera. So that's how I use mine. It also has a couple of buttons to control various things. I don't use these at all. And it has an autofocus manual focus switch. The focus ring is buttery smooth and it is focus by wire. There's also a screen on the top, which is not very useful to me at all. What's useful to me is that this lens, and I've been out shooting with it already today, this lens is nice and sharp. It's decently sized. I like the 77mm filter thread. That's what I like about it. There's a lot of extra features like this aperture ring and this display screen that I really couldn't care less about. But what I do care about, this lens does really well. It's got a fairly nice lens hood. Goes on and off easily, and it looks nice on the lens. And here's what it looks like from the front. Let's see what it looks like on my Nikon Z8. There's a nice red dot to make it easy to find and get it on there just right. Looks good on here. It actually balances really well with the Z8 in terms of size and everything. There's what it looks like on the Z8 with the lens hood. Of course, I always keep my three-legged thing L bracket on my Z8. Looks pretty good on here, I think. Really nice. So now I'm going to take this ultra-wide lens out on my Nikon Z8 and see what kind of photographs I can get with it in a landscape photography frame of mind. Let's go. I'm here at the Chickamauga Dam. Actually, that's the Tin Bridge Railroad Bridge behind me. Chickamauga Dam's over here. And we're in the days just after Hurricane Helene went through, and while it didn't really affect us as bad as some people to our south and to our east, we did get a lot of rain. And as you can see, the water is nice and high and the spillways are running wide open. So I'm using the Viltrox 16mm f1.8. I have the Maven 10-stop neutral density filter on there. I'm shooting at f8 and I'm making some 25 and 30-second shots of the Chickamauga Dam. Here's my shot of the dam with the Viltrox 16mm. This is at f8, 25 seconds with the neutral density filter and ISO 64, which is such a wonderful ISO to be able to use with the Nikon camera. I thought the lens captured this well. It was a very dreary day, as you can see. The long exposure has smoothed out the very rough waters of the Tennessee River right here in the tailwaters of the Chickamauga Dam. This is where the water comes out that's been through the generators, right in this area. And over here, when there's a lot of rain, they'll open these spillways. And over here is where they're building a new lock, which is progressing. They're starting to go a little bit more vertical with it. And you can see the flags with the long exposure. The flags are moving around. There's flags on these cranes and flags over here on the powerhouse. But there is the dam picture. And here's another picture I didn't document that I made, but it's exact same settings in the exact place. I just turned the camera in this direction and made a photograph of the Tin Bridge Railroad Bridge. And this is 16mm f8, 25 seconds, ISO 64. All right, well, I've made it to the waterfall, and I'm kind of disappointed because I figured with all the rain we've had, this thing would be absolutely flowing, but this is at the very top of the mountain, so we really needed to have the rain yesterday, and it was really more of kind of day before yesterday when the really hard rains came. So most of it has cleared out, but I'm still able to frame up a composition of this falls, this man-made falls here on this dam in the middle of nowhere on the top of the mountain. Still using the Viltrox, and now I've stopped it down to f11 because I want to get the foreground of these rocks in focus as well as the dam in the background. So I've stopped down to f11. I'm tilted, as you can see, I'm tilted down a pretty good bit. My shots of the Chickamauga Dam and the railroad bridge were absolutely level, but on this I've got the camera angled down, and there's beautiful light in the background. I knew this cloudy day would make for beautiful light up here, just as long as you don't have sky in the background, which is another reason I have the camera angled down so much. But f11, ISO 64 with the Nikon Z8, and I've got the Maven 3-stop neutral density filter on now, and my exposure is 4 seconds. I tried a 6 and a 5 second exposure, and I had a little bit of blinkies in the bright water on the dam as it's coming over, but 4 seconds gives me an exposure with no blinkies, and if I need to brighten it up, I can without overexposing the waterfall. Here's the first shot on the top of Signal Mountain. This is 4 seconds, f11, ISO 64 with the 16mm Viltrox. Next, I'm going to move up here, and I'm going to stand somewhere in this area. And this little rock right here is going to be my foreground interest. I've moved closer. Now I'm, as usual, got my rubber boots in the water, and I'm trying to get a shot where the foreground is almost all water, although there is one rock. See that rock right there with a leaf on it? It's in the foreground of the shot, and I really want to smooth this water out. So I've got the 10-stop filter on, and I think I'm going to try a 5-minute exposure. I'm actually shooting the 5-minute exposure right now. It may or may not come out. We'll see. Still working on my 5-minute exposure, and as you can see, getting some sprinkles on the camera. It's fortunate that the Viltrox lens is weather sealed, and so is the Nikon Z8. I'm making the 5-minute shot again. I put the 10-stop back on, and I'm making the 5-minute shot again. And the reason I am is because in the front of the little rock that I'm using as a foreground interest, there was this fallen tree, which is now over here. It's just a tiny little tree. It might even be a branch, but it was forward of my foreground interest, and during the entire 5-minute exposure, it was bobbing in these little waves. The waves are maybe 2 inches tall at the most, but it's all blurry, and I didn't like that. So I climbed around there and threw it out of the way, and now I'm doing the 5-minute shot again. The light has gotten a little bit brighter, so my second 5-minute exposure that had no tree messing up the shot had just the tiniest bit of blinkies. Probably would have been fine. I could have just left it alone, but then I also got to noticing that leaf that's on the rock, that's my foreground interest, its natural position was down at the bottom, right at the water line. And I said, you know what? It would look better if that leaf was right on the top of the rock. So I crawled around, and I'm wearing these boots, but I can only get so deep. I had to kind of lean across to get over there, but I managed to move the leaf to kind of the top of the rock. And I've sped my shutter speed up from 300 seconds to 240 seconds. And I'm making what I hope is my last extra super long exposure shot of this beautiful man-made waterfall here on the top of Signal Mountain. This is the 240-second exposure, which is 4 minutes. And I didn't use a circular polarizer. I like the look of photographs I've started to discover that don't have much or even any polarization. You get more depth that way But this little spot right here had lots of reflections, and it was just occasionally above the water. And I really didn't like the way that looked or this spot right here looked. So I kind of wish I had used a polarizer. The actual foreground interest rock right here looks fine in my opinion without a polarizer, but this didn't come out too good, nor did this. I love this huge swirl of bubbles that you can get on a 4-minute exposure, 240 seconds. But I didn't like this, so I decided, you know, this is not cropped at all, but I decided, I wonder what would happen if I cropped it to a 3x1 and cropped out everything from here down. So that's what I did, and here's the way that looks. This is the same shot as the one we just looked at, and I really like this as well. I did crop it just a little bit from side to side, and of course a lot up and down, but I like this one as well. It really makes this area, the swirling bubbles, a feature, which are not a feature in that other shot. But I like it both ways. This way is also cool. Still on top of Signal Mountain here at Middle Creek, and I've decided to make one more shot, and this is a shot that I've made before, but never exactly like this. This is a boulder that's just downstream from the dam. It's up that way a little ways, and I call it the Prudential boulder because it looks like the Prudential Get a Piece of the Rock advertising. And the creek is going by this way, and there's a little bit of a just barely a waterfall, just some tiny white water area right here, but for the most part it's a relatively deep pool, and by deep I mean maybe 3 feet. And this big boulder, which is probably 12 or 15 feet tall, and then there's a beautiful branch sticking out. I think that might be a dogwood. I'm not sure, but it's got some nice color. And there's a tree over here on the left that has a little bend to it that's also in the shot with this Viltrox 16mm ultra wide. And I've kind of got all that together, and there's colors. The foreground is brown, and then where the water gets deeper it turns blue, and then the rock. There's a lot going on here, and I think it's really beautiful. And I made a shot, not super extra crazy long exposure this time. I just put the 3-stop on and made a f11 shot, ISO 64. Here is the Prudential Get a Piece of the Rock photo. I did crop this one to 16:9. I like this branch of different color leaves here, and I like this unusual shaped tree here in the background. I like the colors in this. You've got kind of a brownish copperish tone here, and then as the water gets deeper you get a more of a blue tone. There are some swirling bubbles in this area, not very many but some, and then this rock is interesting as well. So this is an area that I've photographed. I photographed the dam many times, but this is the second time I've photographed this scene, and I like it. This one is 8 seconds f11 ISO 64, and of course using the Viltrox 16mm prime. Okay, I'm hiking back to the car now. I've waited until I got past the really steep part to talk to you, because during the really steep part I'm kind of huffing and puffing. And anyway, this is supposed to be a review of the Viltrox 16mm f1.8, and ended up being just a photo shoot. And you know, I have only scratched the surface, change hands, of what this lens can do, because I don't think I shot at a wider aperture than f8, but this thing is a 1.8 maximum aperture, so it should be great for astrophotography and all sorts of things, maybe even some concert photography, which you need a wide aperture for that, and you could possibly be in the pit at a concert and get the entire band in the shot instead of just a part of the main person. So I'm really excited about this lens, and I'm going to be using it a lot in the future. Stay tuned to the channel to see more videos featuring this lens. Just so happy to have it. You know, Viltrox, they're really an amazing company in terms of making lenses for a reasonable price that perform really well. I've reviewed many Viltrox lenses over the years,
starting with the 23 and the 33 and the 56mm APS-C lenses, 1.4s, and the 75 1.2 APS-C lens, the 13mm 1.4 APS-C lens. So many great ones. And really the only one that I've reviewed, even including the tiny $99 28mm f4.5 pancake lens, the only one I've come close to not recommending is their 33mm 1.4 for APS-C. That one had a pretty good bit of chromatic aberration. But anyway, this lens is dynamite, and I couldn't recommend it higher. Very happy to have it in my bag, and I am excited to use it a lot in the future. I think this is going to save me a lot of money because I probably will not be buying the Nikon 14 to 30 f4. That lens has an 82mm filter thread, and I know a lot of people use 82mm filters, but I've always used 77s, and this lens has a 77mm filter thread, so it's perfect for me. Now, if you have 82mm filters, you can use the step-up ring, but all my filters are 77, so they go, whoa, so they go right on it, which is fantastic. Anyway, I've rambled on long enough about this lens and how much I like it, and I hope you continue to watch the channel and you'll get to see lots more with this lens. Now, I have lots of gear to use. I have Canon and Sony and Nikon, so it's not like every video is going to be with this lens, but there will be videos in the future with this lens. You can count on it. So stay tuned to the channel, and if you like this video and made it through this long-winded talk, hit the thumbs up button. That helps me out a lot. And subscribe and hit the bell if you want to see some more. As always, I look forward to seeing you in my next video. Bye-bye.